Also, for the last 15 years, I've done the report on firefighter fatalities for the U.S. Fire Administration. That includes research on every fatal incident to a firefighter in the United States, and it includes, most significantly, going to the PSOB offices at the Department of Justice, going through all those files there, and seeing what actually happens in many fatal cases. So there's a lot of case studies in our program that we'll talk about. We're going to have hopefully an enjoyable program this morning. We're talking about a deadly serious issue, but that doesn't mean we can't enjoy ourselves as we talk about it. I hope you all feel the same way. So I'm going to ask Mike Wilber to introduce himself.
Good morning. My name's Mike Wilber. In real life, I serve as the Executive Director of the International Fire Service Training Association at Oklahoma State University. I've been at IFSTA for almost 27 years of my 32 years in the fire service. Because of my background and education in fire engineering and safety, from early on in my career at IFSTA, I was responsible for just about every book in the last 25 years that had anything to do with pumping apparatus, aerial apparatus, hydraulics, fire streams. I've also been an active member of the NFPA Firefighter Professional Qualifications Committee since 1987, and the NFPA 1002 standard for driver-operator professional qualifications is assigned to that committee, and I chaired that committee for 4 editions of that standard. Done a lot of research for the IFF with Kevin and developing some of these roadway safety programs. I'm currently on a new NFPA committee that is developing professional qualifications for safety at roadway incident scenes, which is part of the overall program, although we're not going to talk much about it today. There will be a new standard out in about 2 years to give specific information on how to, as safely as possible, work at roadway incidents. So that's sort of my history on this topic.
Lieutenant Steve Crothers. I'm with the Seattle Fire Department. I've been in the fire service for roughly 16 years, 12 of them with the Seattle Fire Department. I'm currently assigned at the training division as the driver training instructor for the department. I roughly have 28 instructors under me that I'm responsible for that go out and teach our curriculum or teach it at the training facility. 20 of them are driver training instructors and 8 of them are tiller instructors. I am an EVOC instructor and a Washington State EVIP instructor as well as a tiller instructor. I built the tiller program for the Seattle Fire Department and have been fortunate enough to be able to teach that here in the U.S. and Canada as well.
All right, the 4th member of our panel is not here yet. He's Lieutenant Mike Wilber with the New York City Fire Department. He almost needs no introduction. He's an apparatus safety instructor, an expert on fire apparatus. So he'll be joining us hopefully later in the program to talk about some changes going on here in the FDNY. So we're giving this program 3 times this morning. You guys are in lucky number 2. This afternoon at 3:30, I believe, we're doing a roundtable this afternoon and tomorrow on apparatus issues. So if you don't get your question answered today, or if you have some epiphany tonight and need a question answered, we'll be around for those panels this afternoon and tomorrow. And those panels are really free form. There's no presentation. As with all the panels, it's just questions that come from the audience. So we encourage you if you'd like to come.
If you'd like to talk to Mike Wilber, we're pretty sure he's going to be at the panel this afternoon. We just don't know that he's going to get here in time for this class. So
he has a doctor's appointment, which is hard to get sometimes. All right, so Lieutenant Crothers is going to start us off with a case study that comes out of Raleigh, North Carolina.
So let me ask the question, how many people have here seen the Raleigh video, the actual video where they rolled over hands? Okay, so a lot of people haven't, okay. So let me kind of just give you some background on the video you're about to see. In 2009, I was in the process, like I said, of developing the tiller program for our department, and prior to that, we used to just do what most departments did, which was basically on-the-job training. And so we set out to develop a program that was formal, had a classroom piece to it, rodeos, and then some sort of qualification piece to that. As we were doing that, just about the same time we just built and finished our curriculum, Raleigh, North Carolina had an accident, pretty significant accident, where they were responding, and as they went around a corner in their tiller apparatus, they actually rolled their rig. Being at that, as significant as it was much more dramatic because it was caught on video. It was caught on 2 different actual angles. One came from a bus. The city bus just happened to be sitting at the intersection, and they rolled 24-hour video. And it catches this rig going through the intersection, and you get to see the actual rollover. The second view comes from a red light camera. So as they went through the intersection and blew the red light, the camera activates, and we get a different view from that as well. As significant as it was, we recognized right off the bat, let's put that into our curriculum. We started piecing that up. We kind of dissected the accident from our perspective of what we thought happened. And we used it in our program and had our students go through the program, and at the end we would show the video and then have them tell us and teach back to us why this accident happened using the tenets from our program. And it worked really well, and we found some success with that. Well, I wanted to make sure that we were teaching the right information and that we weren't giving misinformation. So we went ahead and contacted Raleigh, North Carolina, talked to Jason Lane, the tiller operator, Steve Page, the captain, struck up a conversation with them. By the way, anybody here from Raleigh? Anybody around that area? Okay. Good guys out there. We started talking with them, built a dialogue with them, asked the question, what did you guys learn? What can we take from that? We're kind of surprised by the answers because their department hadn't done an in-depth study on what had happened, and they were very intrigued in what we thought about the accident, which was kind of strange to us, being that we were completely across the other part of the coast from where they were. But it was a good partnership. I believe that's when the partnership was built between our departments, and we started that process of dialoguing back and forth with them. If you fast forward a year ahead, their department receives their new tiller rig, which the insurance paid for. Their chief McGrath, basically said, listen, we're not putting anybody in this rig unless we get some training. So they went on the search to find some training. They looked up and down the East Coast and really couldn't find anything more in depth, and they knew about our program, contacted us again, went back and forth, and we agreed that we'd go out and do the training. One of the things I asked if we were going to go out and do that training, would it be possible for us to actually interview all 4 members that are on that rig in hopes of somehow building a training video for the fire service. And they agreed to that, which we were like, that's really wonderful, because they were really putting themselves out there, exposing themselves to all of us to see what they did, and giving us an insight to what they went through. So we went out, we conducted the 5 days of training for them, did the classroom, did the rodeos, and they just really took to this information. They had been driving that rig a certain way for many years, and they felt that that was adequate. However, there was a large minority of people in the department that were quiet about how this rig was being driven, and our program gave them a voice, which was kind of nice to see, and they really took to that. Got to know the guys, gave them some good training, and then we sat down to do the interview. And that, to us, was going to be kind of how do we get that, those questions answered. We were surprised and blown away by their honesty and just upcoming with the information, which we were just really happy with. Went back to Seattle over the next year. We edited this video, sent it back to Raleigh, and our fingers were crossed, hoping that they would not want to change anything because they had final say on the video. And credit to their department, they changed nothing with the video and let us go ahead and produce it as it was. So you're going to see this video. You're going to see a 3-part video, if you will, kind of what their story and what that day went like and what they experienced, the video itself. You'll hear about what they learned and what they went through to try to make changes in their department. And then they'll talk about the training they received from us. But what I'd like you guys to focus in on is that what they learned. Because that's the piece that if you'd like to, you can take this video back to your department and use it. It doesn't matter if you're driving a tiller rig, a chief's buggy, a medic's rig, engine. Same principles apply, other if you subtract the tiller apparatus, the driver and the tiller operator, as far as what they had to do to get around that corner. But the intersection analysis, the speed, the seatbelt issues are all there. The late apexing, or excuse me, early apexing into that corner, those issues apply to all of our rigs, regardless of what you're driving. And we'll also have on here, you can currently get this video off the web right now. It's on our website in Seattle, and we'll share that with you as well.
On the day of the accident, it was Friday, July 10th. Temperature was probably 90 degrees, mostly sunny. Normal day for the city of Raleigh.
started the day off, and we went to the grocery store because the truck company, it was our day to cook. So the four of us jumped on the ladder, and we took off to the grocery store and got our groceries.
I had been online for 3 months, and I was still in my probationary period, and that day I had been floated to the ladder to complete my training.
We're heading back to the station, and went through some of the downtown district, just getting some more time in behind the wheel, because I'd only been on the truck 3 months, and stopped at the train station when we saw Rescue 2.
So we stopped on Cabarrus Street that day, and we were just kind of joking, talking with them, and it was really hard for me to hear. So at that time, I had to put my window up so that I could hear what was going on, and that's when the house fire call came in.
And as we're sitting there, we get dispatched to a structure fire.
I could hear everything on the radio, on the headset, and Captain Page said, well, let me get dressed.
At that point, I told my driver, Tommy McGee, I'm going to step out of the rig and I'm going to put my gear on. I unlatched my seat belt.
And I immediately grabbed my bunker pants, and I was trying to put those on. And by this time, Captain Page had hopped back into the truck, and we were gone. And we were going, and I've always worn my seatbelt. And this particular situation is the first time I ever actually got a call while I was already on the truck, and we were in motion. And as a new firefighter, the last thing I want to do is to hold my captain up or to hold my lieutenant up. I don't want to be the one that makes people have to wait on me. So I undid my seatbelt.
As we were approaching Dawson Street on Cabarrus, I remember thinking, okay, I got to get my seatbelt latched back. I remember holding that seatbelt in my hand, and that's about all I can remember of that. But I do remember thinking I need to get that belt latched.
Started making the turn, and you know, right into the turn, I mean, we were geared up for a house fire, structure fire. You're always reacting that little bit more faster.
As we were going into that Dawson and South Street intersection, I was leaning over the dog box, hitting the channel, and I remember feeling the truck shift. It was a real hard shift, and I was looking out the windshield, and I could see a car sitting in the turning lane on South Street. And I remember thinking, we're hitting this turn a little hard.
As we approached the intersection, I saw an SUV at the stop line. So I turned the back steering wheel to kick out the back end so I wouldn't run over top of that car. And I kicked it around and lined the tiller back up with the tractor and thought everything was fine. And then all of a sudden, you heard that god-awful yawing or squalling of the tires.
It was that deep squall you hear in that skid. And I looked in the mirror and I could see the trailer was up on one tire.
You get unbalanced, and that's what I thought it was, you know, and I thought it was going to level back out and everything was going to be fine. But I realized that it wasn't, and I realized that we weren't coming back. We were going.
And at that point, I remember feeling my right shoulder really slammed hard into that door, and I was looking out the window into the mirror to check my tiller operator.
I remember Captain saying, Tommy, and I realized at that point we were turning over, and it went through my mind, well, maybe if I hit the brake real quick and steer to the right, I can pull us out of it.
The ladder started to move in front of me, and all I saw was a ladder starting to roll. And I remember telling them, whoa, and it happened very slow, it seemed like.
And I could hear the tiller operator yelling, whoa, 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 whoa. And at that point, it's like everything locked into slow motion.
We had one ladder truck overturned, 3 firefighters on the ground.
I just held on and closed my eyes after it started rolling because I didn't think I could do anything. It was happening so quick. So I just closed my eyes and just thought this is going to be really bad.
The whole time I was thinking I almost had my seatbelt on, and I didn't. I didn't get it in time. And I can't visually remember everything, but I remember what was going through my head and just praying that whatever happens, I just don't want it to hurt.
I'm looking out the window at the sidewalk. Is there anybody on the sidewalk? What are we going to hit? You know, where are we headed? Because at this point, I knew we were turning on. I knew it.
So basically at that point, as fast as it went and all that thought process, and I just held onto the steering wheel and basically just waited till everything was over with.
As the truck was turning, and I remember looking at the sidewalk and thinking, this is gonna hurt. This is gonna hurt.
I could see everything going on around me. I could see Captain Page. It was like he was been thrown to and fro everywhere.
But I still had that seatbelt in my hand. And it hit, and I can remember the sound of the metal bending, the gravel flying. I just had this big numb feeling. And then I remember this big impact, and then everything just went blank from there.
And I remember the windshield flying out, and just seeing Captain Page kind of falls out the front windshield when it hits and on his back.
And I'm laying on the ground, and I can feel the dirt in my mouth. And I'm trying to get my breath back, and then I take that deep breath, that first breath after you've had the breath knocked out of you. And as I'm sitting up, then I can feel the pain in my hip. And I remember sitting up on my hands, trying to get up on my knees and looking at my radio on the ground, my handheld radio, and it was in pieces. It was, I'd say at least 3 pieces. Thought for sure I'd broken my leg. All I could think at the time is, okay, I've got to get some help down here. I got to find out where my people are at, and I've got to get some help down here.
Headquarters, did you copy there was an overturn, ladder 4?
I can remember seeing Tommy. Tommy came around in front of me, and I'm looking up at him, and he, you know, he's got that look on his face. It's hard to describe. And immediately I'm like, "Where's Kelly?" The firefighter was in the rear, and I need somebody to check on Jason, my tiller operator. I was pretty sure and felt in my heart that I had lost my tiller operator.
So I go back in, and I look in the back, and Kelly's nowhere to be found. And I'm like, man, all kinds of thoughts going through my mind. Like, where's Kelly? Is she underneath the rig? Is she been thrown out?
And the first thing that I hit was that window that I had just put up. So I knew that if I hadn't had that window up, I would have been out.
When I opened up my eyes, I had to close them again because of all the glass and the debris. And the rescue truck had got there. And all I could think was, you know, is everybody all right? And he said, you're bleeding pretty bad, and we're going to have to cut you out. And all I could think was, then I got scared.
It was really just, seemed like mass chaos, and really all I could think about is how many people I've hurt in this wreck, you know, it's going through your mind.
I just remember opening my eyes and looking out the front window, which had been shattered, and I saw my captain, and the adrenaline, everything just kind of kicked in, and I just got up and immediately went to my captain. I
took a pretty good blow in the head. Things fade in and out. What was going on at the time, I remember asking, how's Jason? You know, where's Jason at? And it seemed like, and they may have answered me, but I don't remember it. I don't remember anybody ever telling me, Jason's okay.
I just couldn't open up my eyes because my face felt like it was burning. But later on, come to find out that I was cut all the way across my head and a bunch of chunks of skin were missing. And then the paramedics, overheard them calling it a trauma. And I was like, who's a trauma? You know, I was thinking about Steve and Kelly up front because I'd already saw Tommy.
Kelly was sitting there with me, and I remember looking at her face, and she just had that look of terror in her face. And she just, we all had been through a pretty tough point at that time. And I'm trying to get a grip on the situation because I felt like I needed to be in control, but there was no control there.
You just had a total of 3 patients, 3 PIs. Which units do I have from this location?
What I've learned the most from this is, as a culture in the fire service, it seems like everybody's always focused on when you receive that call, we got to go, 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 go. Slowing down a little bit, checking those intersections, to me is one thing that we're going to do more often.
I have learned that seatbelts are very important, and I will never, ever go anywhere without wearing it. Me getting there is important, and my safety is important, along with the rest of the crew.
Seatbelts are the key. It saved my life that day, because if I didn't have it on, I'd have been straight across that yard.
As a company officer, making sure everybody's wearing that seatbelt. I took mine off, and I swear I cannot remember. I feel like I had relatched that belt, but at the same time, I went out the front windshield. Was my mind so focused on making that run that I just forgot about that belt?
Never thought of all the people that was associated with me going to the fire calls, how it was my responsibility to make sure they got there safely and that they got back to the fire station safely. Looking back, I thought I knew where the line was. It really has made an impact on the way I think about that if I'm driving a piece of equipment.
I was busy changing that radio channel that we blew a red light. I don't even remember slowing down for it. And in my mind, I assumed it was green because I wasn't looking at it. Now, let's slow down. Let's take these turns slower. Let's stop for these stoplights. Let's stop for the stop signs and see our way clear. If we would have stopped for that stoplight, this truck would have never turned over.
The key is you know, we look after our families as much as we can. Well, when we're at work, we look after the citizens as much as we can. But sometimes we take that extra risk, and we're looking after the customers by trying to rush to get there, or the citizens to get there, and it's like we're putting our families on the back burner, so we're actually not looking after our families anymore. And I don't drive like I used to. I mean, it's taken me some deep down inside, you know, looking at my soul, thinking about it. And I love driving. I'm not scared to drive, but it was hard, you know, and thinking about it every day.
I can see this accident probably affected me more as a firefighter than any call that I'd been on previously. I eventually got to the hospital on that day, and I just can't help thinking about their moms and their dads and daughters and just brothers and sisters there at the hospital, and it's kind of being overwhelmed, like, you know, well, I'm the reason now that they're here.
What can you do differently to prevent this accident from happening again? And that number one thing always comes up is training.
Raleigh Fire Department has been very much in favor of getting training for the new tiller that we have out here.
So we started researching training programs, tiller driver operator programs, what the different programs were out there. And most all programs were running along the same lines, the same type of training. And we talked to Seattle Fire Department, and we took a look at that program and said, well, this looks a little more in-depth, a little more informative than what we've been finding. So we trained towards that program and learned a lot more from it.
The Seattle Fire Department has been willing to come out and train us on it and go through their training program.
Through this training, I think we can get across that it's not just another piece of equipment, and it's a whole different animal compared to the rest of the rigs that we ride around on. Going through this training, I think it's very important that each person being able to drive it has to go through some actual training and classroom portion and road course training. And it's important that the front driver and the tiller driver really kind of click together and they know what each other's thinking, know what each other's doing.
I think it'll help our department grow, and it'll help the newer tiller drivers and some of the older ones. It'll help them.
Us here at Raleigh Fire Department and partnering together with Seattle Fire Department have really stepped up a notch on our training.
How the tractor reacts, how the trailer reacts to the tractor, back and forward, it's just been an outstanding program, and that to me is going to make us all better drivers. And not just drivers, it's company officers too. Company officers need to sit in this seat and they need to realize what this truck is doing, because if you're not aware of what that truck is doing, then you're missing out as a company officer of not understanding what the two guys are doing front and back. we need to make sure we're trained correctly when we go out and operate these vehicles so that this won't happen again.
Okay, that's the video. Like I said, at the end we'll have a link that you can go to get it off the Seattle Fire Department webpage, and at that point too, you can also now download that video and use it in your training if you're doing that in your department. Any questions at this point? Okay.
Mike Wilber. All right. The rest of the program is talking about, we're going to have Mike Wilber talk a little bit also, but we're going to speak about a program that was developed by your IFF for you that has to do with vehicle safety. This is actually a revision of a program that was developed in 2005 that'll be available on the internet for all of you in about 2 months, we think, at the IFF website. The thing I love about the lieutenant's presentation is it's about a real incident, it's about real people. So what we try and do in this instructional material is we try and insert case studies as often as we can that illustrate the points that are in the text. So it's real people. As Mike mentioned in the first presentation, we don't block out the names of the local. The IFF supported us on that. So anytime we have a case study, you know where it is. We identify it by the local. Any illustrations that are in the report that are taken at a particular local, we identify that same local. So what my job today is to talk about the case studies and fill you in. Mike will talk about the main program. All of the materials that you see here will be in the final package. In addition to what you see in the PowerPoint or what's in the book, for every case study, there's additional information available on the website, extra pictures of the incident, generally the police report from the crash. If there was one, the fire department report, the NIOSH report if there was one done on it, and also news reports to give you some context if you want to drill a little bit deeper into any particular incident. And we hope that that's useful to you if you decide to pick a case out or pick out a piece of the material to use in your own training programs. All the stuff is open source. Some of the stuff is PDF, like the newspaper articles and stuff, if you want to grab them. But the PowerPoints are open. You're welcome to go in and grab what you like or what you need out of the PowerPoints. So I want to introduce Lieutenant Mike Wilber, a legend in his own mind. Mike is a lieutenant on FDNY and one of the smartest people you'll ever meet on fire apparatus ever. On both how to use fire apparatus, how to build fire apparatus, how to buy them. So we're very honored to have him here today. And then he'll be with us this afternoon on the panel. We plan on directing all the hard questions to Mike this afternoon, and we'll answer the easy ones. So, all right, so Mike Weeder's going to take over and go through. Again, if we seem irreverent, we're talking about really serious stuff here, but you know, we're trying to present it in a way that you don't fall asleep.
Thanks, Kevin. And just to be clear, the whole package is very similar to the one that you can download now, the current version. There is a student manual that's 50 or 60 pages that is excellent for training. I know of some departments that have used it for promotional exams for drivers and make people read it. It covers not only driving safety, but also incident scene safety at roadway incidents, which is becoming an increasing problem in the fire service. You all go to calls and know that there's more traffic on the road than ever. They're distracted by texting and things like that, and we're starting to see a slight rise both in the fire service and other agencies that operate on the roadway with struck-by incidents. The fire service used to have 1 or 2 a year. Now it's 4 or 5, 6 a year. Law enforcement had 34 struck-by fatalities in 2010. So it's an increasing problem. And we're going to try and help offer some solutions on how you can make that very dangerous situation as safe as possible. So there is a student manual, there is an instructor outline, there is the PowerPoint program, there is additional information, as Kevin mentioned, not only additional information on the case studies that are in the report, but other ones that we didn't have room for in the report. And there are a lot of pictures. The one that off the top of my head from Tulsa Fire Department sent us almost 300 pictures of a pretty severe crash. So it's very comprehensive. And the last thing is about an 8-page. I spent 3 days Googling and everything else and found probably a couple hundred different links to relevant documentation, information, reports, how you can look at the Department of Transportation's manual uniform traffic control devices, which regulates what's supposed to be done on roadway incident things. So it's a very useful report. We're very close to getting it out. This is a draft. We found a couple things that we still have to switch, but the actual program itself has 5 chapters. We're only going to look at chapter 2 today on occupant safety. The first chapter is an introduction that kind of talks about the problem and statistics. You know, as we know, response and roadway fatalities in the fire service are the second leading cause of firefighter fatalities. Annually, about 25% of all firefighter fatalities are related to either being in a vehicle or being hit by one. Chapter 3 is how to prevent collisions and safe driving practices. Chapter 4 is new from the existing report that we did. There's been a tremendous amount of research done in the last 2 to 3 years since we did the previous report on visibility and conspicuity of emergency vehicles. And not paint. That debate's long over, whether lime green's better, whatever. But what is effective is the kind of reflective markings that we're using now and which ones are most effective and how drivers react to them. There are also, in fact, IFSA, and Kevin helped with it, did a report for the United States Fire Administration on emergency vehicle conspicuity that was released within the last year. And there was also a tremendous one done through the United States Fire Administration and the Society of Automotive Engineers in concert with Michigan State University on emergency vehicle warning lights. What are the most effective types of lights under various conditions? What are the best colors? What are the best combinations? What's better at day? What's better at night? And how to design your apparatus to meet those things. So there's a lot of neat new information in this report. The last chapter is specifically on safe procedures for operating a roadway scene. And again, as Kevin mentioned, we don't hide the names. We're not calling people out. There may be some people from these departments in the room. All the departments gave us permission to use the photos and the stories as examples of things that happen when things don't go wrong. So it's for a learning opportunity. It's not for trying to make fun of people. In this chapter, we're talking about the apparatus occupants and what the responsibilities are. Everybody has a responsibility to act the correct way in these situations. The driver, the company officer, the firefighter. The fire departments have a responsibility to make sure that they have good procedures and safe apparatus things. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then the last thing we'll talk a little bit about is occupant safety issues in ambulances, which is a very vulnerable position, particularly if you're in the back when something bad happens. So we're just going to run through this. Like I said, this is just one of the 5 units. We're still polishing it. And in each case, we try and start off what we're talking about with a case study. Kevin will cover those.
All right, anybody here from San Antonio this morning? All right, we can say whatever we want about San Antonio this morning. This is a crash that happened in, just almost a year ago, November of 2010. Engine and ladder were in quarters. The engine alone was dispatched to structure fire. The ladder decided that they would take it in and add themselves to the call. Both units left the station about the same time. They turned out of the station and headed toward a freeway overpass. They were going under a freeway overpass with an intersection just before it. The intersection had a red light. There was a queue of cars there. So the engine leading went into the opposing lanes. The ladder following went into the opposing lanes. When they reached the intersection and cleared the intersection, the engine crossed back into the normal travel lanes, going underneath the freeway overpass. The ladder did not cross back in and follow the engine. They both came through the overpass at the same time. The engine in the normal travel lanes and the ladder in the opposing travel lanes. The engine hooked the left in front of the ladder and proceeded to the structure fire. As the ladder went through the intersection, the driver lost control of the vehicle and dumped the vehicle over on its side. No one in the truck at the time or in the ladder was wearing their seatbelts when the crash occurred. There were minor injuries. Certainly, everyone was transported to the hospital, but 3 of the firefighters had minor injuries. The firefighter in the right rear sustained more severe injuries. He broke his neck. He had to be extricated from the vehicle, which was quite an operation. We have a couple pictures in a second. The police department did an analysis of the incident and cited excessive speed and an improper turn angle at the intersection. Again, they had such a short turn. It's no mystery to people in the room here that all fire trucks, especially ladder trucks, are top heavy, and so the truck dumped over. The all-new apparatus, I think for the last 3 or 4 years at least, have black boxes. Mike, what's the first year of the black boxes? Last couple? 09. 09. So anything built to NFPA 1901-09 edition or greater has a black box in it that measures engine speed, apparatus speed, seatbelt status, braking applications and stuff like that. So they pulled the black box on this ladder, and the data that was in the black box correlated with the police department investigation. The ladder was going about 33 miles an hour when they made the turn. There was no braking application. Once the engineer braked the apparatus at the station when they got on the rig and pulled out, but there was no further braking application until after, well, there was no further for that truck forever because it was trashed. After the investigation was complete, the fire department, for the first time, Chief Charles Hood is their fire chief. He's a former assistant chief in Phoenix. The captain was suspended for 60 days. The engineer was suspended for 45. The firefighter that was relatively uninjured also received a suspension. The firefighter that was more severely hurt did not get a suspension. Chief Hood said that they felt like that the pain and suffering that he'd gone through was more than enough of a punishment compared to with the other guys. So here's a picture of the intersection. Again, when the final product is out, you'll be able to go to the website and look at all these pictures and other ones. This is facing the apparatus. We're coming toward the cameraman. You can just barely see it, but there's some scratch lines and pink paint on the pavement. Never a good sign when you're talking about fire apparatus. Would you agree? All right. This is them actually doing the extrication. They had to use their heaviest rescue tools. It was a situation where they had to stabilize the apparatus to make sure it didn't crush down on the firefighter anymore. And again, a bad crash. The truck was trashed. It was originally purchased for $600,000, and the replacement cost $800,000. One of the things that the San Antonio Fire Department did is they brought that rig down to their training academy, and over the next few months, every person on the job there got a chance to see that rig and see what happened to it in the crash. And the investigation and the outcome were all over the papers, as you might imagine. So everybody got their eye full of that one.
Okay, as I mentioned, we're going to go through what are the various responsibilities for people that are involved with an apparatus that's in the station and going to respond. We start off with the driver-operator. Obviously, they have the greatest impact on how the apparatus is going to be driven and safety procedures. One of the things that's very crucial is that you, and I think a lot of times people kind of take this lightly, overlook it, it's boring, you kind of do it at the beginning of every shift and you kind of get in a routine. But a pre-trip inspection at the beginning of each shift is very important. Sometimes the information doesn't get passed on from the previous shift if there was a problem with the truck, and if that's the case, you want to make sure that you can identify anything that might be an issue before you go and start responding to calls, or else you could get yourself in a situation where you have a defective apparatus and you weren't diligent enough to identify that ahead of time. So it's a very important part of the process, and don't look at that lightly every day as just something you have to do. If you find major maintenance problems, report them. If you have concerns about it, and we'll talk a little bit about it later, don't drive a truck you don't think is safe. Refuse to operate it if you think there's a serious safety issue. We've seen so many case studies we've looked at where they knew they had a problem. In some cases, they didn't want to give up their primary truck because they knew that the reserve truck that they get probably be in worse shape than the one they have, so they keep operating a truck that, in several cases that we know of, they kept operating a truck they knew had problems, but they felt it was better than what they'd get if they turned it in. That's not the right approach. Well, it could be. It depends on how your protocols go to your department and that. But obviously, if they could show that the driver knew that something was wrong with the truck and failed to report it and continued to operate it, I think the company officer would be just as at question in a situation like that. Here's a perfect example. Obviously, this truck shiny side down. I didn't have to get my undergraduate degree in engineering technology to understand that that leak didn't happen after the wreck. It doesn't flow up. So obviously there was a situation with this vehicle that somebody failed to identify and report. As we'll see later, even in the NFPA documents and things, that one of the major things on a pre-trip inspection you need to identify is leaking fluids and identify what the problem is. There's an example that that was in part responsible why that truck is, the front of it's through a bar, actually went into a building, and upside down. The driver operator is just as responsible as the company officer, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit, for making sure everybody's wearing their seatbelts. And you know, it's 2011, folks, and we're still talking about seatbelts, and there's still people out there that think that every second counts, and the time it takes to put on a seatbelt is, and take it off might delay them saving somebody's life, or it's more crucial to get your air pack on than wear your seatbelt. And the truth of the matter, it isn't. And there's a bunch of guys in here that have been in the fire service as long as me. I started in 1979 on a truck that had the air packs in green cases in the compartments. So there's some people in here that did the same thing. I see them over here. Are we saving more lives now and saving more property that we have them on when we get there than we did when we got off the truck and had to open the case? It really doesn't make a difference. And a lot of fire departments are realizing that. Kevin's department doesn't have air packs in the cabs anymore. They can put their masks on while they're responding, but their main job is to stay seated and belted, and they grab the pack when they get off the truck. What's most important is getting there safe. And quite honestly, I know several departments where I've talked to that are doing that now, and they said they actually think it makes them safer because that little extra 30 seconds gives the company officer or whoever else is there in charge a little extra time to really evaluate the situation and decide whether we really want to go in or not, as opposed to charging off the truck all dressed and grabbing the hose and going. So in some respects, we're kind of going back to where it used to be, but when you look at it from a safety standpoint, you know, the same thing with, you know, that ladder truck incident we just saw, they ran a red light. 2 to 3 seconds per intersection for a complete stop at a red light. It's about the figure, isn't it, Mike? Somewhere. You hit 3 or 4 red lights in a call. How many calls in your career with 8 seconds have made the difference? We've got to get that sense of urgency and culture that every second counts. You know, they wouldn't have rolled that truck going to a fall victim. We treat calls differently, too. So we all have to be responsible for each other. Make sure you have proper training to drive the apparatus. And most departments are not fortunate enough to have identical apparatus throughout the department. There's different brands, different years, different makes. Make sure that when you train drivers, that you train them on all the apparatus they're going to be expected to drive. That can be a problem if they get sent to a station and don't have the training of that apparatus. There's a big difference between driving those rigs, and if you're not trained on all of them. One of the case studies that's in the current version of this report that you can download, and it'll be one of the extra ones in the new one, was a case in North Carolina where a female firefighter had just gone through 2 weeks of the fire department training program, driver training program. They, you know, did all the training on the ladder trucks and the engines and those things, and she passed, did very well in the class. Her first assignment was to the one and only station in the department that had a water tanker, a water tender. And she was not trained on that apparatus in the 2-week training program. On her second shift at the station, they had a training drill scheduled about 2 miles from the station, and they, the company officer said, why don't you take the water tanker so you get used to driving it? And that way, if we get call and you have to drive it, you're a little familiar with it. She made it halfway to the training exercise, rolled the apparatus, and was killed. It was significantly different than the truck she was trained on, which were all pretty modern trucks with diesel engines and automatic transmissions. This was a gas, still, it was an older truck. It had a gas engine, it had a 5-speed with 2-speed rear transmission, and her familiarization killed her. So we have to make sure that we train the driver operators on the actual rigs they're going to drive. Operate the vehicle in a safe and effective manner. If you're operating the vehicle in a manner that ultimately leads to the booster tank not even being on the truck anymore, that's probably not a safe and effective manner. 60 miles an hour in a 30-mile-an-hour speed zone, approaching a T intersection. Fortunately, in this case, everybody was wearing seatbelts and they all walked away from it.
All right, anybody here from Detroit today? All right, we can say whatever we want about Detroit. This is an incident back in 2007 in Detroit. An engine company responding to what turned out to be an arson structure fire. 4 people on the rig, captain, engineer, and 2 firefighters in the back. As far as we know, no one wearing their seatbelt as they were responding. As the apparatus responded, not going particularly fast, it was going about 15 or 20 miles an hour at the moment it was struck. An SUV, a Chevrolet Suburban operated by a guy that was high on meth, crashed into them from the right-hand side at about 60 miles an hour. It pushed the engine off the track that they were on, to the point where they struck a telephone pole or a power pole. When the vehicle stopped into the power pole, the captain and the engineer came either out the front windshield or out the side window. The engineer was named Joe Torcas. He was about 6'6", so not a small man. They couldn't decide on the scene if he'd come out through the windshield or if he came out through the side window. But he came out in the initial collision. So he was actually run over by the fire apparatus, and he was trapped under the apparatus when it came to rest. So again, a situation where the crash was completely survivable for everybody that was in the vehicle if they had stayed in the vehicle. But unfortunately, the captain and the engineer were both ejected. The captain was injured, and unfortunately, Engineer Torcas passed away at the scene. I think we get this feeling sometimes that the cab of the apparatus is this magic ship that you can't possibly get hurt in. It's different than your own personal car. You wear your seatbelt all the time in your personal car, but not so much in the apparatus. And again, the apparatus are pretty tough. Gordon Graham is a speaker on risk management. He has what he calls the lug nut rule. If there's a collision, especially in an intersection, the vehicle with the most lug nuts wins. And generally, you guys are in vehicles that have the most lug nuts, so the crashes are survivable, but it's very important to stay inside the apparatus if at all possible, and seatbelts are really the key to doing that. The lessons learned here is that it is the company officer and the engineer's responsibility to make sure that everybody's in their seatbelts before the vehicle moves, and I know that's difficult, but it's just true. We can't stand up here and say everything's okay, you don't have to wear them. It's just a basic deal. And then apparatus drivers should be especially cautious at intersections. Our Assistant Chief of Operations, Steve Christ, says that he thinks that of the risk that the fire department faces, probably one of the biggest risks is the risk that we take every time we go code 3 to a call. And the worst places to go code 3, of course, are at intersections. So you have situations, we had a situation in our department last year where we had an engine struck by a vehicle coming up a freeway off-ramp that ended up with the captain being ejected. So certainly none of us are without blame or without stain. But seatbelts really are the key to surviving apparatus crashes. They keep you in the vehicle and keep you in your place in the vehicle.
So again, company officers in charge, they're responsible for the entire crew, and they're responsible for making sure people do things right, and they're wearing their seatbelts at all times. They're also responsible for the driver operator, and you know, we've heard some situations. I think it was in your study you looked at where the company officer thought there was some concerns about the way the person drove the truck on a regular basis and didn't say anything. We're past being good old boys and that in the fire service. We see how that hurts people. When we see somebody doing something wrong, we have to not be afraid to call them out. And if you're a supervisor or a lieutenant or a captain on an apparatus and somebody's doing something unsafe, That's what you're supposed to be handling and telling them not to do that, not just allow it to continue occurring until something like this happens. You know, Kevin and I have done a lot of work in various capacities related to these things. He's been very active in compiling the Fire Administration Firefighter Fatality Report every year, and we've done a lot of work for the IFF on roadway stuff, and I've done it with IFSTA, and I do a lot of expert witness work at lawsuits, and if I had a nickel for every time I had a company officer say, well, I didn't realize how fast we were going. Well, what the hell were you doing? You know, you weren't watching? Is this the first time you ever rode with a person? You know, I think one of the great solutions is, Mike's smiling at the picture up here, for how many years now? All FDNY apparatus have a speedometer on the officer's side. That kind of eliminates...
With a suicide brake, too.
Yeah.
There's actually, you can actually flip the switch on the guy if he's out of control. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's been for probably 2 rounds of apparatus, probably 2 decades.
That kind of eliminates the argument, well, I didn't know how fast we were going. The speedometer's right in front of you. And I don't know about the new generation apparatus, but I think you told me on the first generation it was only $300 a truck.
Yeah, it's in the scheme of things, it's no money. And in our job, it makes the officer more accountable now because there is no, well, I didn't know. Now you know. And as an officer, then you would have to take, you know, some kind of action. It's like a toggle switch, and it allegedly is supposed to bring you to a, you know, smooth stop. I've never had to use it, so I don't know. Thank God.
Can you imagine driving for him? That's pressure. I have often compared this to the ultimate driver's ed car. You know, like you had the ones that you drove when you were in high school and they taught you to drive and they had a brake on the other side. Well, now they have a speedometer too. The other thing I think is important for company officers, and that officer from Raleigh mentioned that, you know, it's a fire, you know, we're ready to charge, and it's always okay for a company officer to say, hey, you're going too fast, slow down. It's never okay to say, hey, speed it up. Come on, this is a job, we need to get there. Most times the driver-operator is operating that apparatus at their comfort level. If you want to make them go beyond their comfort level, that's when these kind of problems are going to happen. So it's absolutely never acceptable to tell somebody to go faster. But it's perfectly acceptable to tell them to slow down. You're the second set of eyes in that front of that apparatus to help the driver see potential hazards that are coming, identify if you have traffic signals that are getting ready to change, vehicles changing lanes, things like that. Make sure that you're acting as much as a co-pilot as you are worrying about what your first line is going to be when you pull off at the fire, because if you don't get there, you're not going to be able to pull that anyway. So your ultimate responsibility at this point is to help work with the driver to get the apparatus to the scene safely. The other thing is, just as a driver-operator is, you're responsible for making sure that everybody on your company is wearing their seatbelts. And, you know, again, it's hard to believe in this day we have to convince people to do that. And there's still that sense of urgency. I think comfort level that you think you're in this big cab and nothing's going to hurt you, and that sense of urgency that every second counts and that every second doesn't count. That extra time to put your seatbelt on and off is not going to really make a difference in anybody's lives but your own. So you need to recognize that. There are simple solutions. For one of the things I forgot to put on this PowerPoint, that's in Phoenix. That's a $20 solution. Those rearview mirrors are in front of the company officer. So that all they have to do is look up and they can see if people are wearing their seatbelts in the back. Obviously that started years ago before we had the seats that beeped at you and things like that, but there's a simple solution that you don't even have to turn your head to see everybody's doing the right thing that's sitting behind you.
All right, our next case study is from San Francisco. Anyone from San Francisco in the room? All right. This is a crash from a little bit further back in January of 2003 that unfortunately took the life of a firefighter, Mindy Oler. The crew, she was a firefighter assigned to an engine company. They were in a spare piece that had an open back. The front two-door, it was a two-door cab with open jump seats in the back. She was in the left-hand jump seat behind the driver. They were dispatched to a call. As they began the response, both firefighters in the back gave the captain a thumbs up that they were ready to go. As the apparatus responded, I think it was descending a freeway ramp or ascending a freeway ramp that was turned to the right, which threw, of course, everybody to the left-hand side toward the engineer. Unfortunately, at that moment, she got out of her seatbelt and was reaching for some hearing protection that was hanging on the cab, lost her balance, fell off the rig, struck her head on the pavement. She laid in a coma for 5 days and passed away. It's a recurring theme. Safety advances as time has gone by has made fire apparatus more safe. Unfortunately, we all still have those same vehicles in our fleets, the older vehicles. The two-door trucks are fading away, but there are still plenty of them out there, and they'll be in use for another 20 years in some fire departments, generally not in career departments, but they're out there. There's another case study in the program from Massachusetts where a firefighter was a passenger, a left-hand jump seat passenger in an open cab. They had put a half a door or a gate on the rig to protect the jump seat, to protect the firefighter from falling out. Unfortunately, the gate part was attached to the cab, and the latch part was attached to the body of the rig. When they turned out of corners, they went through a little dip at the base of the ramp, which torqued the truck, and the doors would pop open every time they left the station. So as they were doing this, the firefighter in the back was reaching for a gas meter. They were going on a gas call. Same deal. He fell out of the cab and struck his head on the pavement also. So there's a lot of danger, I think, also in reserve apparatus that we need to be especially careful of. Again, all members have to be seated and belted. You're going to hear that 100 times from us today. And then address the safety of seating areas in the older apparatus if you can.
Ultimately, it all boils down to ourselves. We're responsible for our own actions. You shouldn't have a company officer or a driver remind you to put your seatbelt on. You have to take personal responsibility for everything that you do on the job, and that's one of the most important things. The chances are much higher that you're going to get killed in an apparatus wreck than killed at the scene of a fire. I mean, just look at the statistics. So don't focus, we do all this focus on RIT teams and saving our own and stuff. Seatbelts have saved more firefighters than RIT teams. Plain and simple. You really want to address the true issues, it's apparatus response, 25% of the fatalities, and something like 80% of the ones that are killed in apparatus response accidents are not wearing their seatbelts. That's the real one of the primary hazards we face. Don't loosen your belt for any reason. If the seatbelt is not in the apparatus, refuse to ride the apparatus. How can you get in trouble for, I mean, you could maybe early on, but ultimately, if you're concerned about your safety and the truck, that NFK standards is lack of seatbelts is a defect that warrants taking the truck out of service. You've got backup there. Some departments, if they have to use an older apparatus that has 2 seats and doesn't have an enclosed cab, actually give if it's a 4-person company, give them a second vehicle, a Suburban or something like that, for the other people to ride in instead of riding in exposed positions. So if you have that capability in your department, that's one thing to look at.
Can I jump in here just a second?
Yeah.
Who's responsible for your personal safety? You use microphone. You for you. 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 You are all responsible for your own personal safety. Nobody should have to tell you to go put a seatbelt on in 2011. We're all big boys and girls in this room. It's your responsibility. The reality, though, is that if you don't fulfill that responsibility, you let your city down, you let your fire department down, and you let your family down. Who here in this room has experienced a line-of-duty death in their department? How's that working out for you? It sucks, doesn't it? Yeah. I'm a lieutenant in Ladder 27 in the Bronx. If you remember, several years ago in 2005, 6 firefighters in the Bronx jumped out a window. 2 of those guys that died were my guys. I take this more seriously now than I ever have before. You need to get mad about it. You need to take the message back and change the culture of what we do. If you don't put your seatbelt on and you get killed, for you it's over. But what a mess you have left behind for all the rest of us to clean up. A financial mess potentially for your family. The department is in disarray. I didn't go to work for 18 months and didn't answer a phone call from a widow or one of the kids or a memo or something to do with those line of duty deaths. There are certain choices that we all can make. You can choose whether or not to stop at a red light. You can choose whether or not to put a seatbelt on. Another health and safety issue, you can choose whether or not to eat another dozen donuts and become a heart attack risk. But if you don't believe in your own personal wellness and personal safety and get people to buy into that, and you survive, you could be the one that has to go clean up the mess. And it goes on and on and on and on and on. You think the guy dies and you bury him, it's over? I assure you that's not the case. It lingers for months into years. And how selfish of you to get into an apparatus and cheat your kids and your wife of you being here because you were in a hurry or you couldn't be bothered or any other cockamamie excuse that you want to use. If you don't get anything else from being here today, get the idea that you need to go back home where you work and change the culture in your department and become a change agent. There's nothing new here that they've done. Year after year at this and every other symposium and class, it's the same stuff over and over again. If we do not learn from history and we don't change the culture of what we do, history will continue then to be our guide, and it's just not going to go well.
So I have to follow that? He's the master.
What he said.
Yeah, what he said. There you go. Well, we'll just continue through this program of history. NFPA standards are specific about only three instances where you're not to be seated, you don't need to be seated and belted. One of them is hose loading operations, and then it's very specific. The apparatus, particularly LDH, it's hard to load if you have a lot out without operating the apparatus. But the apparatus has to be moving forward. No one can be on the tailboard. They either have to be on the top or behind the apparatus, and no more than 5 miles per hour, which I think is kind of ridiculous to even state. Have you ever tried to load LDH at 20 miles an hour? I mean, you know, I don't know how that would work. It's obvious that you're going to be driving slow. Tiller training. There was a great shot in the video that Steve showed. A tiller apparatus equipped with a spare seat for the instructor. And that's allowable as long as the instructor is seated and belted. And then obviously there are situations, even though they're making improvements, and we'll talk about that a little bit here in the program, on restraints for the back of ambulances, but there are still situations where that's difficult, and obviously in those cases you may not be able to be belted at all times. If you're still riding apparatus that have unenclosed seats in the particularly in the jump seat area, you should be wearing a helmet and eye protection at all times. And regardless of what the design of the apparatus is, if the sound level is over 90 decibels, you should be wearing hearing protection. And that's not simple NFPA requirement or recommendation. That's actually an OSHA regulation for workplace safety.
Okay, our next case study is from Boston. Anybody from Boston here? Excellent. I know there's Boston guys here at the show because I've seen them. This is an incident that happened in early 2009. Lieutenant Kevin Kelly was killed in this crash. This was a 1995 E1 110-foot rear mount ladder that had responded to an EMS call. When they were clear of the call, the crew got back on the rig and started their trip back to quarters. That trip included almost immediately as soon as they pulled out of the parking lot of where the call was, a very steep hill that they had to go down. As they started down the hill, the brake pedal went to the floor. They had no brakes. They could not stop the rig. The operator told the lieutenant that he did not have brakes. The lieutenant told everybody on the rig to brace for impact and started honking the air horn to clear the way in front of them. They went down the hill and picked up speed as they went, and if you ever get to Boston, it's worth a trip to this intersection to see just what they're up against. It's a very steep hill. It almost looks like it's a San Francisco type hill. When they reached the intersection of a very busy street, I think the name of the street is Tremont Street, they crossed all the lanes of traffic, including a couple of light rail lines. Didn't hit any vehicles as they went through, just by the grace of God, I think. After they got through to the other side of the road, they crashed into two vehicles that were parked on the street, crashed through a very substantial brick fence, a big tall brick fence, and then into a high-rise building embedded in the high-rise. This is a shot from the rear of where they landed, and then a shot from the side of where the truck was embedded in the building. Lieutenant Kelly was killed in the crash instantly when they went through. The issue here partly was seat belts. Not everyone on the rig was wearing their seat belt. Unknown with Lieutenant Kelly if it would have made a difference in this particular crash. The situation here was just an abysmal maintenance program for apparatus in the Boston Fire Department. We have a friend who helped with the investigation of the apparatus after the incident, and they found that the only brakes that were getting any application at all were the two front brakes on the front axle. The rear brakes were not applying at all. As a matter of fact, the barcode was still on the brake shoe inside the drum of the left rear wheel. It never made contact to brake the vehicle at all. So this was a case where the maintenance program was being done by individuals that were not certified to do apparatus maintenance. It was being supervised by people that weren't certified to do apparatus maintenance. And Boston's made a bunch of changes since then. They've bought a bunch of new apparatus, and they've improved their maintenance programs markedly. But unfortunately, they knew they had that problem in advance. The local was complaining about the condition of the fleet. The fire department in the city had put off purchasing replacement apparatus as a natural cycle for a long time, and they ended up with a very high mileage fleet, some very old trucks. They actually had situations where kids that were riding the trucks were actually the trucks were older than the young firefighters on them for some of the rigs. And that's not an unknown situation in fire departments, but it's relatively unknown in larger cities. So again, this boiled down to a preventive maintenance program issue, an apparatus maintenance issue. They had problems inside the fire department with their apparatus program. They also had problems with their contractors on the outside of the fire department, contractors that were working on their apparatus. And no one can touch Mike's nerves anymore.
Obviously, the fire department has responsibilities, and it's to provide us with safe apparatus and to provide us with proper training and make sure that the apparatus not only is safe when it's new, but it's regularly maintained and fixed when there's problems. And we've seen many examples today already where that did not happen. This slide is kind of talks not only about response, but also roadway scene safety, which in the greater part of this program, there's an entire section on operating a roadway. So, but any time that we're setting up, we're buying apparatus, we need to make sure it follows all the appropriate standards. If there's certain states have different weight requirements for apparatus where they might require extra axles or things, certainly we want to follow NFPA 1901. And I was just talking to a guy from a fire department in Oklahoma that just bought some new trucks, and they didn't like the new chevrons that are supposed to be on the back of the truck. So they had some type of flag-looking thing put on the back instead of the chevrons. And the manufacturer made them sign a release of liability that the manufacturer would not be responsible if this became an issue in a crash because it was non-compliant with the standard. And, you know, I think if somebody asked me to sign that, I'd have a concern. You know, you're willingly saying we're not going to follow this national standard, and we'll sign an exception to it. We'll take all the responsibility. I don't think that's a good idea. So, and that's just on reflective markings. There's many other things where people want to vary from the standards that, in most cases, is really not a good idea. We talk about the manual uniform traffic control devices. That's related to, that's a federal document that tells you how to operate on roadway incidents, which when you get this entire program at your departments, that's an important part of it. Make sure that everybody's educated on the SOPs. You know, just printing them and putting them in a binder that's in the shelf at each station isn't any good if the people haven't been educated in them and regularly review them. And the important thing is that they're enforced. You know, it's probably almost worse not to have any SOPs in the long run than it is to have them and not enforce them. If you have them and don't enforce them, that's like welfare for lawyers and expert witnesses. Because they'll come right in when somebody doesn't follow an SOP and question why you didn't follow the SOP. Oh, that's the way, but we never do it that way. We always do it this way. Cha-ching. And believe me, I serve as an expert witness on a lot of these, and it makes the case a lot easier when you have people that aren't following their SOPs. NFPA 1915 provides an effective plan for how to have a maintenance program for your apparatus in your department. It tells you who's responsible for what. It gives you examples of timetables and procedures that you need to do on a regular basis on your apparatus. It helps you develop a list of things that are specifically, when you see them, warrant an apparatus being taken out of service until the problem's fixed. And again, all of you are responsible for refusing to operate an apparatus that you don't think is safe until the defects are corrected. These are some of the things that the standard recommends. If you see excessive leakage of vehicle fluids, we saw a ladder truck upside down. It was clear that that had been leaking before the accident. Don't operate the truck. Take it out of service. Obviously, braking and steering are probably the two most critical things if there's any defects in those things. Excessive play in the steering wheels or braking issues. The truck should be removed from service until those situations are addressed. Missing seat belts or inoperable seat belts is a cause for not operating an apparatus. That is a clear safety issue. Inoperable wiper blades. If you're trying to drive and you can't see because the wiper blades aren't working correctly, that's a serious safety issue. And unless you're in Phoenix like Kevin, they never have to, they don't even need them on their trucks most of the time. But most of us do.
For the dust.
Yeah, just for the dust. Yeah, they don't need it for the rain. You know, that's a serious situation. Doesn't seem like a big deal, but it's a big deal if it's raining. Poor tire condition. Case study after case study talks about poor tire conditions leading to serious collisions. And we need to make sure that we check those on a regular basis. And all these things are things that can be identified in the pre-apparatus check that we talked about at the beginning. That's the driver-operator's responsibility to look for these problems before they occur. One of the things that we're really pushing hard in this program is establishing and enforcing policies that require no loose tools or equipment to be in the cab of the apparatus. And there were some shots of the Raleigh rig where you can see all the stuff laying on the floor, well, now the roof, and the inside of the roof that was thrown around in the inside of the truck when that truck rolled. We didn't make up this picture. This is a picture we took. That truck, they were in service and waiting for the next call. You know, if you get involved in a collision, you want that rolling around in the back of the truck with you? Again, this is one of those things, well, we want to have everything right when we jump off the truck and every second counts. It does not count. Every second doesn't count. Especially if you never make it to the call, and you get involved in something where that thing, in addition to the crash, bops you in the head. We've got to realize that the 2 seconds that would take to get it off a properly mounted rigging device on the outside of the truck probably isn't going to make an overall difference in the outcome of that call, as opposed to having it laying at your feet when you're in the truck riding to the call. If there are tools that are stored inside, and there are ways to mount some tools effectively, you need to make sure you do that. And that includes SCBAs. There's a great picture of an engine in Los Angeles years ago where they got involved in a serious collision, and it was a collision enough that the valve stem broke off the cylinder. It was on one of the older 2.2 bottles, and the cylinder just missed the company officer's head and went just perfect hole right through the windshield and down the street. You know, those are the kind of things that can happen when we have loose stuff laying around the back of the truck.
Okay, our last case study of the day is from Polk County, Florida. Anybody from Polk County in the room? All right, this is an incident from 2004. In Polk County, the fire department provides EMS service, but there's a third service in the county. There's the sheriff, the fire department, and EMS that actually provides transport. So this is a call where the fire department responded on an EMS incident. EMS requested that one of the firefighters ride in the ambulance to provide treatment to an unstable patient. They were responding to the hospital from the scene with lights and siren in the Code 3 mode. It had just finished raining. This is Florida, so it had just finished raining. As they approached an intersection at speed, there was a queue of cars waiting at the intersection. The driver of the ambulance went in the opposing lanes to clear through the intersection. As she arrived at the intersection, the light turned green. Just coincidentally, she hooked over back to the right to get into her travel lane, lost control of the ambulance. The ambulance slid off the side of the roadway and crashed into a tree. Tire condition was a factor in the crash. The firefighter was sitting in the captain's seat at the patient's head in his seatbelt, but unfortunately the crash was so severe that he was killed in the crash. Just a little diagram of the incident scene afterward. Again, the factors in this crash were the worn tires on the ambulance, driver inexperience, and speed were all factors in this crash. Even if your fire department doesn't provide ambulance transport service, we heard a lot yesterday about the penetration of the fire service into EMS. Almost everyone now provides EMS. Even if you don't provide the ambulance service, sometimes I'm sure you're called upon to drive the ambulance or to be a helper in the back of the ambulance. The back of the ambulance is one of the least safe places for a firefighter to be while the vehicle's moving. We had an incident in Phoenix in the last 2 months or so where we had a relatively low energy collision at the entrance to a hospital, and we've got someone that's still off 2 or 3 or 4 months down the line. There's really no safe way to be out of your seatbelt in the back of the ambulance. We developed a solution in our fire department that was developed by a couple geniuses on our department. It was a vest that you wore that was attached to the walls of the ambulance in 2 or 3 places with seatbelt reels. And the idea was that if you got in a collision, the seatbelt reels would all freeze up and you'd be held in place, or it would limit the arc of your flight while you flew around inside the ambulance, but at least you wouldn't be ejected. So they weren't quite popular, I would say. Mike, am I overstating that? Not really popular. They weren't easy to wear or work in. That's right. It's like being on the end of the ski rope, he said. So we had Nadine Levick, who's an expert in ambulance safety, came and visited our department. This is about 10 years ago. We thought we had the best solution in the world. Our guys were counting, they're picking out new cars for themselves, that the guys that invented it, because they're going to have this solution that went everywhere. And Nadine came and looked at him and said that unfortunately the laws of physics really wouldn't work with that, because the vest would stop your flight and it would restrain your whole body, but it wouldn't restrain your head. So chances are it would break your neck when you're in the crash. So she said there was an upside, though. She said generally firefighters are young and in good shape. The organs would be well preserved for transport after the crash. So I have to tell you, the next day, all those vests came out of the ambulances. Mike was on the job at the time, so that brilliance went away. But there is no good decision. So what we've done in our department to try and minimize risk in the back of ambulances, we try and transport as many patients as we can. Code 2 or non-emergency to the hospital. A lot of times Code 3 is for our convenience, not the patient, so we try and transport as many Code 2 as we can. Go to the closest hospital as much as we can so we don't have to go across town, and then stay in your seatbelt if you can. But we recognize there are situations you have to get out of your seatbelt to provide patient treatment. You just can't avoid that. How many departments had thumpers in the past? Anybody still use them? They were automatic CPR machines for you younger folks. Has anybody ever known of anyone to come alive off a thumper? Any patient ever survived the thumper experience? No. So we got rid of ours. Although someone came up to me after the last presentation and told me there's a new thumper out there that's better and more effective, that's made by a company whose name I can't give. All right, Mike has been working quite a bit on seatbelt issues, and we have a few minutes for him to talk about that, if it's all right with you, Mike? Yeah. And then this other Mike.
It's fine with me.
The seatbelt mic, yeah. And then we want to leave a little bit of time for questions. I want to say, too, that at the end of the day, today, 3:30, we have a round table where the four of us will be answering any questions you have about apparatus. There's no program planned for that time, so please come and ask questions at 3:30. All right, Mike.
What other ding-a-ling runs around with a seatbelt in their briefcase, right? Sure, it's easy. Yeah, like Kevin said, we've been working very hard on a number of fronts, one in the FDNY and the other on a national level. On the national level, for about the last 7 years now, we've been involved in what's called anthropometrics. Anthropometrics is a study of us, humans, as it relates to things. The seat that you're in, the pen that you have, your ring on your finger, eyeglasses, the glass, the size of the glass, all those things are dependent. The watch on your wrist are all dependent on anthropometrics and the size of people. We have been fortunate over the course of the last 7 years to go through 3 phases of study. And the last study, the study that we're in now, is being conducted by NIOSH, and it basically represents one of the largest health and safety, and certainly the only anthropometric study, the measuring of firefighters, that's ever been undertaken. I would like to thank the Phoenix Fire Department. Kevin and his group out there played a big role for us. They were one of 4 sites that we went to measure firefighters. And the idea is that we needed female firefighters, we needed black firefighters, we needed Hispanic firefighters, we needed Hawaiian firefighters, we needed firefighters from every race, color, creed, description, because each race of people have different sizes as far as heads and hands and body shapes. And so we wanted the study to be representative of the firefighting population. In the first part of the study, we measured 700 odd firefighters by hand. It showed that there were problems with things, but it was inconclusive because the measuring was done by firefighters and it wasn't necessarily done scientifically the same. The next thing that we did, we were able to secure funding, and we took and body scanned 120 firefighters. And that became very telling. Certainly in fire truck cabs and fire equipment, bunker gear, helmets, boots, one size, seatbelts, one size does not fit all. One of the things that we learned really quickly is that when you put your bunker gear on as a firefighter, you increase your body mass by a full one-third of your complete body mass. And it was pretty telling when you could take an image from a body scan and actually inlay your body, your clothing, and then the bunker gear and see how much that really added to your physical size. And the reality is that nobody in this business has ever taken that increase in size into account. Basically, from what I could gather in doing this for the last 7 years, is that we put car seat belts in fire trucks and told firefighters to bunker up and just suck it up and wear them. And to date, it really hasn't worked all that terrifically well. And that's probably at least some of the pushback from not wearing seat belts, not because we didn't want to, but because we physically couldn't in some regards. We're now on to phase 3. To date, thanks to the Phoenix Fire Department in the greater Phoenix area, the Fort Worth in the Metroplex area, the Philadelphia Fire Department, and the Montgomery Fire Rescue in Montgomery County, Maryland, and Prince George's, Maryland, and some surrounding counties there. We have measured, done feet scans, hand scans, head scans, foot scans of over 980 firefighters. One of the first things that we were able to scientifically prove, right now in a cab of a fire truck, the NFPA, I believe, allows 18 inches for you to sit down. That's the seat width. If you check your derrieres, many of us here would only be able to fit one cheek in 18 inches and not necessarily the other cheek. but because we're two cheap folks, that becomes a problem. We've been able to unequivocally prove scientifically that to fit 99% of all firefighters in a seatbelt, in a fire truck, it requires 28 inches of room. So they weren't even close. They weren't even close. And you are going to see, as we go through this, you are going to see a number of changes in the cabs of fire trucks, once again, as it relates to seating and belting and sizing. The study has really increased in scope and size because it was pretty much like opening up Pandora's box. One of the questions I asked at a conference years ago, FRI in Dallas, was why is the rung spacing on an aerial ladder 14 inches? Who came up with that? And I asked a bunch of manufacturers. We had this meeting, a bunch of smart people, and nobody seemed to want to give that up. So I slammed my fist on the table. I said, this isn't a trick question. Which one of you here came up with the 14 inches? And some guy, some old cooter in the back, he's like 80 years old. He said, I think that was Peter Person's son that did that. And I said, well, he ain't been alive for 30 years, and he ain't made a truck in 15, so what does that have to do with a 2011 firefighter in bunker gear climbing an aerial ladder? And I have an Asian firefighter in my firehouse. His name is Joseph Chin. He's a terrific firefighter. He's a great guy, big heart, Asian guy, no legs. Okay, so when I put him in bunker gear, put an SCBA on his back, put a saw on his back, and tell him to go vent the roof, that's a problem trying to climb up at an 80-degree angle with 14-inch rung spacing. So there are other sizing issues as we go through time that we are going to address. So that's kind of an update on the national thing. In the FDNY, a little over a year ago, I was tasked with, because I had worked on this nationally, with coming up with a better seatbelt to retrofit in our trucks. Our fire commissioner and chief of department are absolutely adamant that we are going to buckle people up in FDNY apparatus. We have had several extremely close calls where we have had firefighters ejected and seriously hurt, but only by the grace of God have we killed nobody. Just dumb luck. It didn't have anything to do with anything other than luck. And so what we have come up with is this. You will see some things that are similar in your trucks. This is called a female stalk. The female part of the end where the male goes in. And in most regards, it's kind of wimpy, and it could probably use a good dose of Viagra, really, to put it in the truck and stiffen it up. It's very short, the Irish curse. Here's what we've done. We've taken that and scuttled it, and we've come up with something that's going to fit you. It's stiff, so that when you tighten this in the apparatus, it will be in the same position to buckle in every day, all day. One of the complaints, and basically what this is trying to engineer excuses out of why we don't wear belts. One of the suggestions we had is, well, we can't see it in the dark. The next round that we're going to do, we're going to be wrapped in Reflexite. As we move through time, we're really this close, probably within about 6 months, of being able to put an LED light in the red here. So at night, you will be able to see to put it on and to take it off. This will be illuminated. Like I said, in part of the work that we've done, we understand that you increase your body mass by a full 1/3 when you put a seatbelt on. And nobody's ever tried to accommodate you with that. And so what this seatbelt company has done is that they have come up with this device called a Ready Reach, where this will be buckled into the side of the cab. The male end will be here, right by your shoulder, and it'll be basically this. You'll be able to do this in one fell swoop. It's orange, so as a supervisor, as a lieutenant, I can see that you're wearing it. I can look out my mirror, I can look out and see to make sure that my crew has it on, whether it's at night or in the daytime. It took a lot of work to get this far. It seems like it's simple. Nothing is simple with this. We've had a lot of suggestions like, why don't you put amusement stuff in? And really, there's been no bad suggestions with this until we go to the engineers and the engineers say that's a bad idea. But interesting, unlike a lot of other projects that I've worked on, these engineers say it's a bad idea, and here's why. So they're not placating and trying to get rid of you. There's actually a legitimate reason. So just a couple quick updates. I just saw the Chief of Safety this morning. We are going to start retrofitting the whole entire FDN light fleet in the beginning of September, and we should be done by around November 1st. Thank you, Mike.
All right, we're at our time. Thank you very much for coming today. If you have positive comments, I encourage you to fill out the review things. If you have negative comments, you may leave now, if you'd like to. A reminder on your tickets for tonight, if you haven't pick them up on the 3rd floor. If you want CEU credit for this session, make sure you request that on your positive evaluation when you fill it out. Thank you very much for coming.